talk, True Tales of the Supernatural, discusses the past, and whether it's still here. Are our ancestors still with us? Have people actually see the future? And more. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Peter Watson.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. What I'm going to tell you tonight has all ever been told to me in the main. These stories are all true. That is to say, they've been told to me as true experience. And what you make of them is entirely up to you. So can we just ask you a few questions before we start? Hands up who thinks you can go back in time. Right? Hands up who thinks you can see the future. Quite a few of you, right? Hands up who thinks that time can slip. We're doing well tonight. Hands up who thinks that dreams can come true. I think I'm pretty converted in many ways. Hands up who thinks that people who died long ago are still here. Right. I'll tell you these stories. They may not be a surprise to some of you, and you see what you make of them. Remember, these aren't made up by me, they're all true. Now, people have various theories as to what's going on with these stories. Some people say it's a trick of the light, it's imagination, they're pulling your leg, it's a mental aberration. I've got enough stories now to type up into 600 pages of A4. Single space typing on one side. These are all told to me as true. So I'll tell you some of these and you see what you think. There's lots of stories about people who say they've seen figures wearing old-fashioned clothes walk through solid walls. Now I don't understand much of this stuff, I can't explain. If you can, come and see me at the end. Some of these things I'm going to tell you I've written down, so I've got the details correct. So some I'll be reading to you, other ones I'll just tell you as we go along. I got a letter from a chap in Grantham, Mr. T. I don't use people's real names. And he said he had a job in the late 60s looking after the clock of a church in North Wigan, ensuring it was maintained and regularly wound every day. He said on this particular early evening, I left the town and proceeded to the belfry where I could see the altar through a curtained opening. The church itself was veiled in semi-darkness, as I had no need of using electric lights. It wasn't a gradual realisation that they were there. I looked, and they appeared. 3 ladies were walking behind each other to the south wall. 2 were wearing white, flowing gowns. The other one, who was in the middle, was wearing a chocolate-coloured gown. And taller than the other 2. She had ginger hair falling about her shoulders. The others had fair hair. They looked wholesome, not transparent, and they didn't glide or float as one believes apparitions do. Having walked to the south of the church, they turned to face north, put their hands together in prayer and bowed. Then they turned again and literally disappeared into the south wall of the church. I wasn't afraid, nor did I rush off hastily. I didn't mention this to anyone for over 20 years. I pride myself as being a sane, truthful man, and have no reason to make up stories. I've done no research to the history of the village or the church, but I do know that villagers have experienced the vision of a female ghost. The idea that people from long ago are still here and can be seen walking through solid walls may not be as daft as it sounds. And I gave a talk in Preston some time ago, and this chap came at the end. He said, Preston Town Hall's haunted. I said, "Oh, is it?" He said, "It's a bloke called Charlie, but nobody seems to know who he is." Anyway, he said, "My mate," he said, "he's a very down-to-earth chap, the mayor's attendant," and he goes in early in the morning to do various jobs, and he puts the boilers on to get the water cracking for brews and what have you. So he said, "This particular morning I went in, so he sat in the chair, white as a sheet." So I said to him, "What's the matter with you?" Hell, he said, "I don't believe what I've just seen. Apparently, they get winos in the cellar, and some of them haven't walked around the building." He said, "They're a damn nuisance." Anyway, he said, this particular morning he'd gone in, and he saw this bloke upstairs, so he set off to catch him. He said he followed him along the corridor heading towards the room. He said, "I thought I've got him, because there's only one in and out of this room." He said he walked in, followed him through the door, just in time to see his figure disappear through the wall. He said, "My friend's a no-nonsense chap, rather cynical in many ways, but he was very shaken by the experience." If that's imagination, a trick of the light, perhaps one have a break and come and tell me how it works, because I don't know. A lady came one night and she said, "I went to look at a church, I think it was somewhere down south." Said, "I was on my own." Said, "And I'm walking around," said, "and I suddenly saw a group of monks walking up the aisle towards me, up the nave." She said, "I was rooted in the spot." Said, "I watched them, they turned and walked away and disappeared. They walked straight through the wall of the church." She said, "I was literally shaking." Anyway, said, "I went next door to the vicarage, knocked on the door. The vicar came to the door." She said, "I've just been in your church and I've seen a group of monks." And he said, "Oh," he said, "you've seen our monks, have you? Come in along." I said, "It was quite an early old chap." And she said, "He took me into the study and went into them, brought a couple of maps out, put them on the test, have a look at those." And apparently there'd been a church on that site before the present one, and the second one was built, as it were, over the first church. He said there used to be a small monastic foundation just across it. He said there's no sign of it now, all you can see is a couple of bumps in the grass. She said, "I didn't know." And apparently, he said, other people had seen these monks in the church. He said, "I've never seen them, but other people have come and said they've seen these monks." And apparently, where they disappeared through the wall, in the original church, there used to be a doorway. She said, "I couldn't believe it." Now, had she somehow briefly gone back into their time, or had they somehow briefly come up to her time, or had time slipped backwards into the Middle Ages? And if that's a trick of the light, well, I don't know how it works, because it wasn't a fleeting thing, a couple of seconds. She watched them walk towards her, and then away, and disappear through the wall of the church. That's not imagination to me. I said, "Yeah, they're still there. Perhaps in a different dimension to ours." Physicists are saying now there could be as many as 12 dimensions. I can think of 3. That way, and that way. What would the 8th dimension be? And more importantly, who's in that dimension? Is it some of those people who died hundreds of years ago who are still there? Is the past still with us? Mrs. K said when she was about 16, about 1948, she went to Fountains Abbey with her parents. Says they were walking around, she suddenly saw the abbey as it would have been in the Middle Ages. She saw a procession of monks walking down the aisle towards the high altar, and they were chanting. As they reached the altar, they simply vanished, and the abbey went back to its ruined state. She said her parents didn't see anything. Imagination? Is it emotion of that place, or were those monks still there? So when she was 32, her husband was in the RAF. They were going to Compton Bassett. And said, as we're driving by a hedge near the battlefield in Hedge Hill, the hedge disappeared, and they saw a cavalier on a horse coming towards them waving the sword. Within seconds, the figure disappeared, and the hedge reappeared. And I thought, was this a time slip? Had she and her husband somehow driven into the past, briefly? Or was this cavalier still riding the battle as he would have done nearly 400 years ago? Was he waving his sword at them, or at someone else, from this time that they couldn't see? And apparently, a lot of people have said they've been to Edge Hill and they've seen cavaliers and roundheads riding and walking around the battlefield. A lot of people apparently said at different times. And I said, perhaps they really are still there, and perhaps someone should tell them that they died on the 23rd of October, 1642. Because they obviously don't know they're dead. Parapsychologists say the reason why people who died long ago are still here is because they don't know they're dead. And when they realise they're dead, they'll be able to move on. So your theory? I got a telephone call from a lady who lives in Bath. So about 10 years ago, I worked in a chemist shop in Bath. And so it was a nice morning, and the front door was open. So I went across the road for some cakes. So I said, when I came back, put the cakes on the counter, turned around, looked through the open door, and said the road outside had gone back to cobbles. So there's a horse and carriage standing outside the shop with a man and woman stood by it talking. Said he had like a frock coat, she had like a burgundy jacket pinched at the waist. And said I could see beyond them other people walking around wearing old-fashioned clothes. Said after a few seconds they just went like that and returned back to normal. She said I saw Bath as it would have been in the early Victorian period. Is the past still with us in another dimension? If it's not, how do people see all these people from the past and describe them? Apparitions?
Apparitions, that's what they are.
Right. Does that mean they're still here? It does to me.
Yeah, in another dimension.
Right. All right. So maybe it's not just imagination. I think there are things going out there seriously that we don't understand. And although people scoff and rubbish these things, maybe the idea of ghosts is not as daft as it sounds. You're not telling me that all these stories are all imagination or leg pulls, because I can't believe that for me. I can't understand it, but I'm sure it's not just imagination. And I gave a talk in a little village one night in the countryside, never been before, and over the river they had a little home-back bridge. I saw it as I was going in the car. So this lady came in and she said, I used to go to work on a bike. In fact, it's not that far from here, really. And she said, I'm on the bike one morning going to work, and I saw this lady in the village who I knew coming towards me the other way. So she said, as I rode past, I said, morning, Mrs. So-and-so. She said, she just completely ignored me, just blanked me. She said, I was a bit upset about this because I knew her for years. And he said, I went home at the time for my dinner and said to my mother, I saw Mrs. So-and-so this morning. I said, she just completely ignored me. She said, yes, she would. She said, why? I said, they found her dead in her chair at home last night. Do you know what she said? I was that close, I could have reached out and touched her. And she said, and then I realised then why she'd ignored me. Because she died in her chair the night before. Now, she wasn't thinking about this lady, so how does that work? Was that lady, perhaps her spirit, still there? Because lots of people say they've seen what appear to be ghosts who look normal, just like you and me. They're not see-through, they just appear to be normal. Until they find out later on that person's been dead for 10 years, or several hours, A lady said when she was about 8 or 9, she used to visit her grandma in a place called Cocky Moor, near Bury. And said her grandma lived in the end cottage of a tourist, a row of these cottages. So she said she's outside one morning, playing on the pavements. She decided to go in. She went into the cottage and found it different to what it normally was. She said it was a lot quieter than usual. She said the furniture was old, it was a lot darker inside, and she said the kitchen door in the wall wasn't there. So of course she went back outside to check she got the right cottage. She had. She went back in again and found the same thing. So she went back outside again, waited a few minutes, went back in, and the cottage was back to normal, as she knew it. She said her auntie was in the kitchen, she could see through the door, the kitchen door, preparing food. Had that girl somehow gone back in time, not once, but twice? And the other question I thought of was this. If the kitchen door wasn't there the first 2 times, what's the question? Where was her auntie? Where was she? The first 2 times she went back in the cottage, the kitchen door wasn't there. The 3rd time she went back, her auntie was in the kitchen preparing food as she had been in the first place. So for the first 2 occasions, where was her auntie? Where was that kitchen door? Has she gone back in time? Or is it just imagination? You know, I think we don't credit children enough when they say they've seen things. We say, oh, it's just juvenile imagination. Maybe it's not. And I got a phone call from a lady in London, and she said, I've seen it in the local paper. I said, all right. She said, can you explain this to me? I said, go on. She said, my daughter used to say when she was a little girl, Mummy, who's that lady who sits in the bed and talks to me? So she said, well, there is no lady. Oh yes, she's a nice old lady. When I go to bed, she comes, sits in the bed and talks to me. Well, so I thought a bit of imagination. Well, anymore, she kept talking to me. So I said to her one day, what does she look like? She described my mother, a grandma, who she's never seen, never met because she died 4 years before she was born. Now, she said, there's no photographs of her in the house. I've never spoke to her about her. I've never described her. She said, there's no point, she's gone. She said, the way she described it could only be my mother. She said, she was a nice lady. She said, now, she said, at that stage, I could always persuade that when she was born, it passed on through the genes a memory of her grandma she's never seen, never met. But she said, what I can't understand, she described her wearing the clothes we buried her in. She said, I know because I chose the outfit. She said, mother's favourite outfit, I chose it. She was buried in my question and my daughter described it to a T. She said, can you explain that to me? I said, yeah. She's come back to see the granddaughter she never knew when she was alive. Otherwise, how did she describe her so accurately when she died 4 years before she was born, wearing the clothes of the bird? Her mother confirmed it. I said, yeah, she's come back to see her. Imagination. I gave a talk in Burnley in the church, and this man came to me. I was saying in his mid to late 70s, and he said, when I first got married, me and my wife lived in a little cottage, or old cottages. And he said, the setting was more or less up to the back wall. And he said, we had a dog. He said she used to regularly sit up and appear to watch something walking up the wall behind me.